Come all you jolly Shanty boys that put the shanty and go.
There seems to be little romance attached to it, and the man, as either an employer or workman, seeks the woods and looks for anything but sentiment. It's the saw logs he's after.
From Bay City to Clare, lumber camps were set up every 4 miles or so along the rivers. 8 of those camps were owned by Wright and Ketchum out of Saginaw. They employed over 500 men. Sage McGraw was the area's largest employer. They had 20 camps and over 1,600 men. The size of the operations varied from small camps of 25 men to larger camps of 100 workers.
It was in these camps that loggers known as Shanty boys became folk heroes. Every October, they'd ride the train from the city out to the woods. Some would have to walk another 10 miles to their camp before they started their jobs. Men and boys, some as young as 14, worked 6 days a week harvesting timber for a wage of just $1 a day. And these hardy men didn't get paid until the end of the season.
A good source of information on life in a lumber camp came from a guy named John W. Fitzmaurice, who was a journalist from Saginaw and actually spent 4 years in the woods with the lumberjacks while he was selling subscriptions for the Bay City Hospital. So he recorded all of the daily goings-on in the lumber camps, and then about four years later he wrote a book called The Shanty Boy, or as a subtitle, Life in a Lumber Camp. They were called Shanty Boys because the term lumberjack was not commonly used until the 1890s.
Cutting down trees was hard work, and these men had a well-earned reputation for being tough. Each man had a job and got paid based on his skill. Those who cut down trees were called fellers, and most of them, in the early years, used axes.
A team of axemen would take to cut down a 16-inch in diameter tree, probably around 15 or 20 minutes. By the late 1850s, early 1860s, they began to adapt the crosscut saw to cutting down trees. And actually, you would have 2 teams here. The undercutters who would cut a notch in the tree, planning the direction in which the tree would fall, and they would be followed by a group of fellers or tree fallers who in turn would cut from the opposite direction, and the tree would fall according to where the notch was placed. A 24-inch tree could be cut down by both teams probably between 15 and 20 minutes. In the early days of logging, a wide flared type of axe was used, but they were rather unwieldy and very cumbersome. Then an improvement was made called the Yankee axe, which was a single-bladed axe with a heavy pole. This counterbalanced the blade so they could swing and it wouldn't be so hard on their arms. Another improvement was made even later on in logging, a double-bladed axe. This allowed them to have twice as much cutting surface so they could didn't have to sharpen the blades as often. Well, then finally, around the Civil War, an improvement was made to the crosscut saw, adding what we call raker teeth. This allowed the saw to remove the chips that the cutting teeth cut. This was a great improvement over earlier saws which simply had cutting teeth. Adding the raker tooth allowed them to cut trees down much more rapidly, and it was physically less demanding on the feller.
Once the trees were felled, the trimmers or swampers moved in to trim them up for moving. Logs were then hauled to the river by men known as skidders, and these men used either horses or oxen to facilitate transport. The logging sled was one of the most important tools in the woods. It was used to move loads of logs to the river's edge. An ice trail was made for these sled skis, and the horses walked on the inside of the tracks to pull the sleigh. Some woodsmen made it a point to see just how big they could get their load. The trick was getting the logs stacked just right.
It took a lot of skill for the top loaders to do their jobs. These men had to be fast, strong, and very, very skilled to make sure that when those logs came up the skids, they could dance out of the way without being crushed.
Men working as scalers measured the size of the log to estimate how many board feet one tree would produce. Then the stamp maker marked the log ends so that each log could be identified and would end up at the right mill later.
A log scaler was a person employed by the lumber company to measure and tell how many board foot of lumber could be expected to get out of a given log. This was done by taking a log scale and measuring across the butt end of a log, and by knowing the length of the log, you could tell how many board foot of lumber you could expect to get out of that given log, allowing for waste. A board foot is a 1 foot square by 1 inch thick piece of wood. This is a traditional measurement for a wood
and it's been since the early days of logging.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click that bell icon to stay notified when we upload new content. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. To help support this channel, click on the link in the description below. We'll see you next time.